Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth branch program, the place for common sense. I hope you had a fantastic night. If not, take heart. The next one will be better. Thank you for joining me today. We have actually two very important topics we would like to discuss. They both related, but we will discuss them separately. It is, of course, the continuation of the reading of the Mueller report and the race to 2020. Give me 60 seconds and I will give you the world. Thank you once again for being here with us. As mentioned earlier, we will be discussing two separate topics related, but we will discuss them separately. First, if you've been here for the first time, welcome to the fourth branch. If you've been here before, thank you for your participation. You are making this journey a little bit lighter, a little bit better. To those who've been here for the first time, let me say that the fourth branch program is not associated with any political party. The ultimate objective is to perfect the union. Of course, in order to do that, we have to remove the biggest obstacle of all, which is ignorance. Now, for the past few weeks, probably a couple of months now, we have been doing reading of the Mueller report. We're still reading on volume 1. Now I'm glad to mention that we're very close to completing the reading of volume 1. We have less than 30 pages left on volume 1. And as soon as we're done with volume 1, of course, we will begin the reading of volume 2. Now, we have been doing that, and of course, it is boring, to say the least, because it's not a novel, it's not anything exciting, it's just a reading of a report that is the result of 2 years of investigation into something that happened to our country in the 2016 presidential election. But nevertheless important. Now, I wasn't the only one who found it necessary to do so, because although I've been doing it for a couple of months now there are a number of other venues that are doing the same thing in order to bring awareness to the rest of the population, what transpired, what exactly had Mueller said in the report. Now, we will touch on that a little bit later. Also, last night was what you would consider the official debut of the 2020 presidential election. We say official, but all of the candidates, it's an army of such, in the Democrat side anyway, have been crisscrossing the country and trying to sell their argument, trying to sell their ideas, trying to sell their policies to the constituent. Now, last night, of course, was one of the two nights, because tonight there is going to be also another panel of candidates who will also be making their argument to the nation in order to pick who should be the next nominee for the Democrat Party and eventually the next president of the United States. Now, as we have been doing for the past few presidential elections, we will also be presenting to you, we will be detailing, we will publish an article, we will make clear as to whom we believe will be the next president of the United States. Now, you've heard, you read, you heard your debates, commentaries of individuals who've been talking about either Donald Trump will be reelected, and you've been hearing a lot of arguments on both sides. On the Democrat side, you most likely they don't want to hear the idea that Donald Trump will be reelected president, and on the Republican side, they already, some anyway, already guarantee that it's going to happen. Others are salivating over the idea. That's the way it is in politics, and that's how it's been for as long as this country has been in existence. Now, there is some good to having different political party, because as we already know that in countries where there is just one individual, it's usually dictator, it's usually authoritarian regime, and usually the people have no say over anything. And sometimes I wonder, is it any worse than what we have here? Now, there is an argument to be made, because you could say that here this is not an authoritarian regime. This is, you have the freedom of going to the poll and elect whomever you want to elect. You not being persecuted and so on. There are a number of arguments that can be made. But it looks like when you go deeper down in the freedom, you might have a little bit and ask yourself, how much better do we have it in comparison to other countries which do not have the same structure as we? That aside, we will take a look at what happened last night, and we will also, as I mentioned, publish an article in which we will say categorically, not hiding, not dancing around the issue. In fact, as I just mentioned earlier, we've been writing about presidential election, and thus far we have been not wrong. We have not been wrong, not to speak like Robert Mueller. We have not been wrong. Even the 2016 presidential election, we took really quantum leap, literally speaking, to talk about candidates who were going to make it and candidates who were not going to make it. In fact, just to give you an example, in December of 2015, yes, you heard correctly, in December of 2015, we ruled out any possibility for Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio to even get anywhere near the presidency of the United States in terms of becoming the nominee. We made a number of predictions, not just take something out of a hat, but rather going through a process, an analysis process, and make the case as to why we believe this candidate, that candidate is not going to go any further. In fact, last presidential election, we actually we were shocked ourselves to be so accurate, almost to the letter, as to not only candidates who were not going to make it, but the timing as to when they were going to drop out of the race. And it was so accurate that we don't know yet as to how we have managed to be that accurate, but we were. And Donald Trump was not a surprise. It was a disappointment, not a surprise, because we also wrote a many part in which we categorically say that Hillary Clinton will not make it. That's before James Comey. Hillary Clinton will not make it to the presidency unless she picked Bernie Sanders at that time as running mate. We were not yet at the point of the general election. We were heading there, and at that time Bernie Sanders were not sure whether to stay or to leave the campaign trail. And we actually wrote two very pointed articles in which we say there is no way in the world Hillary would make it unless she picked Bernie Sanders as the running mate. And also, just for sake of explaining how accurate we were, right, that Bernie Sanders, we were rooting for Bernie Sanders, but that did not prevent us from also writing articles to say that based on what we were seeing, that Bernie Sanders would not become the nominee. It's just to give you a sense. By the way, you can read about all that. In fact, we just published a 4-part article in which we said categorically that Donald J. Trump will not be re-elected President of the United States. That part, we are absolutely certain of it. I urge you to read all 4 parts, not just skim over. Read, because there is context and there is continuity in the 4-part article. It says the reason Donald Trump will not be re-elected. I believe that's the title of the article. And in one of those parts, we provided you reference to the 2016 presidential election, during which we categorically say what was going to happen during the 2016 presidential election. Now, I strongly encourage you to read the 4-part article so that you can get a sense as to why. We know that Trump supporters are salivating over the idea of Trump going to be reelected, and there are a lot of political experts, pundits, who've been sounding the alarm, who've been talking about how possible it is. In fact, I read so many articles about how the path for Trump to be reelected. I've read all that, I've seen all that, I listened to all that, but in the 4-part article that I wrote, I'm not making any apology for that, because I am categorically fairly certain. It is, in a sense, how here at the 4th branch we manage to do those things. During political campaign, there are a lot of noise that's made from both sides. Fortunately for us, we are not subscribed to either side. To put it in a non-Mueller way, we're not Democrat and we're not Republican. Yes, sometimes you hear us, and I know that I've heard people mention that that damn liberal, because whenever something is said that's not favorable to Republican, they always call anybody damn liberal. They even label Robert Mueller a sellout, a damn liberal. So I'm not taking offense to that. So because we do not subscribe to either political party, then we're able to turn off all the noise that we're hearing, the noise from Democrat and the noise from Republican, and we stick to what we call a scientific data. We stick to data. We stick to sentiment of the public, and we also do what we call a model, in which we fast forward to as far in the future as possible what the sentiment of the country, and we introduce different elements in the model, different element that can vary that model in terms of what the economy would be like, war, etc., etc. And we look into the future, so to speak. We don't have a crystal ball, obviously, but we modify that model along the way. Like now, this is really very early in the presidential election, but one thing is certain as far as the Republican side in terms of Donald Trump re-election. In fact, we even believe that there is a possibility. We haven't come to that conclusion yet. We're still looking at the data, but we even believe that Donald Trump, despite all that you're hearing, Donald Trump may come to a point where he simply throw the mantle and say, the hell with that, I'm not running for re-election. Now, I know that sounds far-fetched, but we do believe that that possibility also exists. We have not come to that conclusion. The conclusion we have come to, and which we express in the 4-part article, is the following: that the reason we believe Donald Trump will not be re-elected president. And we made the case about all the people that still standing behind Donald Trump, that's still supporting him, that's still defending him. We even look at the possibility again of Russia meddling in the 2020 re-election. So we have created that model and put everything in that model in order to come to that conclusion. So once again, I strongly suggest that you take a look at the peoplebranch.org and read the articles, the 4-part article that says the reason we believe Donald Trump will not be re-elected in 2020. Stay with me. We will come right back to continue the conversation about what happened last night in the debate for the 2020 presidential election. And following that, we will continue with the reading of the Mueller report. You are obviously on the 4th Branch program, the place for common sense. We'll be right back. Live from New York City, at the top of the hour, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., the 4th Branch presents discussion, debate, commentary on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as abortion, homosexuality, war on blacks. Are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Thomas Jefferson, who was our third president, the third president of the United States, said, the two enemies of the people. Now remember, Donald Trump has been calling the media the enemy of the people. Remember that? Now there is one type, only one type of people who call the media the enemy of the people: dictators, authoritarian. Now, did you know that Adolf Hitler, yes, the famous, notorious Adolf Hitler, he considered the media also the enemy of the people. He actually used to accuse the media of fabrication. The word fake news wasn't in existence. Of course, that's a modern term that's embraced by Donald Trump and promoted by everybody who supports him. That's what dictators, people who have authoritarian tendency, that's what they do. They try to dismantle every guardrail of a democracy in order to continue doing what they do best. Now, Thomas Jefferson did warn us. In fact, even the first president of the United States, George Washington, remember every time we read the Mueller report, you should see at the bottom of the screen something to the effect to guard against the imposture of pretended patriotism. Yes, there are a lot of people, and it's not just today that it's happening. In fact, it was happening during Washington time that he had to warn us about that. Guard against the imposture of pretended patriotism. Yes, there are a lot of those people, especially if you look at the way that the Republican Party as a whole, both legislator and constituent alike, have been defending an individual who have been destroying the very foundation of our democracy. But those individuals, if and when they ask, they would say, yes, we are patriots. Why do you think George Washington warned us to guard against the imposture of pretended patriotism? Putting your hand on your chest is not patriotism. Putting your hand on your chest during national anthem and claim to be a patriot doesn't make one a patriot. Being born here in the United States makes you an American citizen, but that doesn't make one a patriot. Thomas Jefferson warned us. He said the two enemies of the people are criminals and government. Not journalists, not the media. The two enemies of the people are criminals and government. But Thomas Jefferson, I guess maybe out of naiveness, may have not realized that there could be a time in the history of the country that what I'm about to read to you, he could not possibly anticipate that. In fact, if he could, he would have not said what I'm about to read to you. He said the two enemies of the people are criminals and government. So let us tie the second down, with the chains of the Constitution. When he said, well, let us tie the second down, he's talking about the government. Let us tie the second down with the chains of the Constitution. Now, Thomas Jefferson must have not had the prescience to see that there would be a time in the history of the country that the Constitution of the United States was too flawed to tie the government. Because the government has removed all the guardrail of our Constitution. For the past 2 years, we have witnessed an individual sitting in the Oval Office doing exactly that. But much worse, Thomas Jefferson didn't see that coming, because there was no way in the world that the framers of the Constitution could have seen that a whole political party in the legislative branch would side with the executive branch to undo every aspect of the Constitution. Now, when you listen to Republican legislators, as I always mention in this program, I have some sort of flexibility for the constituent, which I believe naive, gullible, and of course have to follow the path, have to follow the footstep of the individual they elect to the office. The legislators, congressmen, senators, governors, mayors. Now, it is fair for us, we the people, to give those individuals that we elect in office the benefit of the doubt that they have good sense, good logic, but most importantly, that they are patriot. It's fair to assume that. Well, it is also fair to assume that there are a few, because we're living in a society with diverse views and so on, then it is fair also to imagine that there would be some fringe element in our society who would not care much about the country, who only care about whatever that they have in mind, for selfish reason. But what the framers of the Constitution never imagined is to have a whole political party, both legislators and constituent alike, completely unpatriotic toward the country. Now, this is not mere words that being said by, well, to use the words of the Republicans, them liberal. Because it is not, it's not sufficient. It does not suffice to say you're a patriot, but you have to live like a patriot. You have to act like a patriot. Saying you're a patriot doesn't make one a patriot. Now, as far as rationale that especially the Republican legislators have been providing in order to justify their action of derailing, eroding our Constitution, sometimes I sit down and wonder, is there anyone in the Republican Party who actually belongs, has a mind that can see through this nonsense that those people have been talking about? And by nonsense, I mean literally nonsense, because the legislative branch, according to a very important task of the legislative branch is to exercise oversight on the executive branch. Now, Republican, my fellow Republican, look in the mirror and tell me, have your Republican legislators been doing that for the past 2 years? In order for the Constitution of the United States to be of any value, those whose job is to protect it, those whose job is to exercise, is to apply what said in the Constitution, have to do that, because it does not suffice to simply say you are a patriot. It does not suffice to simply say your job is to do that. You have to do that. And if you notice, since after the 2018 midterm election, prior to that, Republicans simply couldn't care less about the Constitution. But after the 2018 midterm election, they proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, not only they don't care, but they also want to destroy the Constitution, because now they're even fighting the Democrats who are trying to at least do something about it. Now, for those who are saying that it's politics, of course it is politics. It was structured that way. It's always politics. How do you expect it to happen? So I'm not certain I understand the argument. Well, it's those damn liberal, they're just trying to. It is politics. There is no argument there. It is politics when it's the Republican doing it. It's politics when Democrats is doing it. But that's the job for the legislative branch to exercise oversight on the executive branch. And that's what makes a democracy work. So the argument, it's politics. Yes, it is politics. Nobody is arguing it's not politics. It is politics. So what is the problem again? So the Republican constituent, of course, they're gullible, they're naive, and the Republican legislators, they like it that way. So they're able to use the ignorance of their constituent in order to continue doing what they've been doing for the longest. They keep their job and continue to dumbify their constituent and continue to erode our democracy. And they're fine with that. Do you call that, would you call that patriotism? No, those individuals are not patriots. In fact, George Washington warned us against those type of individuals. He said to guard against the imposture of pretended patriotism. It's because he knew that was going to happen. But what I'm certain that the framers of the Constitution did not know is that we would have all those individuals in the legislative branch. So they knew that there were going to be a few far in between. But they could not possibly anticipate that a whole political party, in this case the Republican Party, completely turned against the Constitution of the United States. They could not possibly predict that. So you see, the 2020 presidential election, you cannot see it as a Democrat versus Republican. And the rationale that your Republican legislators are offering you, don't think they're good rationale, because they offer you a rationale to accept the fact that they're helping the executive branch eroding our Constitution, and you think it's okay because it benefits the party. But it's not okay. Do you know that the devil can offer rationale to convince you that evil is good, or it's good to be evil? Would that be okay too? Sometimes I really wonder, and it pains me, because you know the United States is a one boat system. Everyone on the boat would drown, the boat would sink when those individuals, either out of ignorance, out of naiveness, decide to do what is detrimental to the Constitution, to the nation. So the 2020 presidential election is not something to take lightly and to think, oh, it's okay, the economy is great. That's the argument that the Republicans are giving. The economy is great, Donald Trump is doing a great job, so what not to like? The very foundation, the very fabric of our society, the guardrail of our Constitution are being removed, and we're heading towards a place where it may not be possible to come back to what the country has been for 2 centuries now. Is that okay? Now, you may not be around, but your children, your grandchildren will inherit a country that they would not want to live in, because of your action today as a citizen, as a constituent, and because of the action of the legislators you elected to help steer the country in the right direction, but decided instead that for their own selfish reason that they're not going to. In fact, there is a big difference between doing nothing and doing something bad, and that's what the Republican legislators have been doing. So don't think of the 2020 presidential election as an election between Democrats or Republican. Think of it as an election to redeem the country from where it has fallen. And it is today in the hands of the Republican. We need to remove the country from the hands of the Republican, because they have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they cannot do the job they were assigned to do. Easy clip. It just started. It was 10 Democrat candidates who went at it and tried to present their case to you. And I strongly urge you, this presidential election, to put down your clothing, your hat of your political party, especially if you are a Republican, and to vote Donald Trump out of office, because if you don't do that, your grandchildren will hate you for being what you are today. Because as it is today, your actions have caused the United States of America not only to become a joke, no longer the leader, but also destroying the very fabric of our society. Here's what a few had to say. It's just a clip. We're not going to spend a great deal of time giving you different bits and pieces of what was done last night, especially if you watch. But just to introduce you to the candidate, not on the campaign trail, but on the stage. That's the first panel. And as far as the very detail around that, you can get that everywhere and anywhere. So we will return to continue with the reading of the Mueller report, obviously.
Who is the geopolitical threat to the United States? Just give me a one-word answer, Congressman Delaney.
Could you repeat the question?
Greatest geopolitical threat to the United States right now, Congressman Delaney?
Well, the biggest geopolitical challenge is China, but the biggest geopolitical threat remains nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Right? So those are, different questions.
Totally get it. Go ahead, Governor Inslee.
The biggest threat to the security of the United States is Donald Trump, and there's no question.
Okay. Congresswoman Gabbard.
The
greatest geopolitical threat.
The greatest threat that we face is the fact that we are at a greater risk of nuclear war today than ever before in history.
Senator
Two
Klobuchar.
threats: economic threat, China, but our major threat right now is what's going on in the Mideast with Iran. If we don't get our
try to keep it at one, slimmer than what we've been going here. One or two words.
Our existential threat is climate change. We have to confront it before it's too late.
Senator Warner.
Climate change.
Yeah. Senator Booker.
Nuclear proliferation and climate change.
Secretary Castro.
Say China and climate change.
Congressman Ryan.
China, without a question, they're wiping us around the world economically.
And Mr. Mayor.
Russia, because they're trying to undermine our democracy, and they've been doing a pretty damn good job of it. We need to stop them.
As it is probably or should be obvious at this point, the 2020 presidential election, we cannot just see it as just another presidential election, because the soul of the country is in the balance. For the first time in the history of the United States of America, we have an individual in the Oval Office whose words mean absolutely nothing. He lies about everything that he says, everything that he does. And he gets everyone around him to lie. Everyone who works for the Trump administration lies about everything. That is unprecedented. And Trump himself, he just cannot not lie. But that's not the biggest problem. Is the fact that all those individuals who supported him, who voted for him, continue to listen to an individual whose words are the words of the devil, literally speaking. Isn't the Bible telling us that the devil is a liar? I even wonder sometimes if the devil lies as much as Donald Trump does. Carolyn Kennedy said, "The bedrock of our democracy is the rule of law." This is a reading of the Mueller report. As I mentioned earlier, we have less than 30 pages left in volume 1. Let's continue with the reading. Ambassador Kislyak meeting with Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn in Trump Tower following the election. On November 16, 2016, Catherine Vargas, an executive assistant to Kushner, received a request for a meeting with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. That same day, Vargas sent Kushner an email with the subject, quote, "Missed call" in capital letters. Russian Ambassador to the U.S., Sergei Ivanovich Kislyak, ... end of quote. The text of the email read, quote, reference, "Setting up a time to meet with you on 12/1. LMK, how to proceed." LMK stand for let me know. LMK, how to proceed, end of quote. Kushner responded in relevant part, quote, I think I do this one, confirm with Dimitri Simes of CNI that this is the right guy, end of quote. After reaching out to a colleague of Simes at CNI, Vargas reported back to Kushner that Kislyak was, quote, the best go-to guy for routine matters in the US, end of quote, while Yuri Ushakov, a Russian foreign policy advisor, was the contact for, quote, more direct, substantial matters, end of quote. Bob Forsman, the UBS investment bank executive who had previously tried to transmit to candidate Trump an invitation to speak at an economic forum in Russia, see Volume 1, Section 4.A.1.D.2 Supra, may have provided similar information to the transition team. According to Forsman, at the end of an early December 2016 meeting with incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his designated deputy Katie McFarland in New York, Flynn asked Forsman for his thoughts on Kislyak. Forsman had not met Kislyak, but told Flynn that while Kislyak was an important person, Kislyak did not have a direct line to Putin. Forsman subsequently traveled to Moscow, inquired of a source he believed to be close to Putin, and heard back from that source that Ushakov would be the official channel for the incoming U.S. National Security Advisor. Forsman acknowledged that Flynn had not asked him to undertake that inquiry in Russia, but told the office that he nonetheless felt obligated to report the information back to Flynn, and that he worked to get a face-to-face meeting with Flynn in January of 2017 so that he could do so. Email correspondence suggests that the meeting ultimately went forward, but Flynn has no recollection of it or of the earlier December meeting. The investigation did not identify evidence of Flynn or Kushner meeting with Ushakov after being given his name. I should also note that Robert Mueller is scheduled to testify to Congress on July 17th. This is a date we expect to be very, very busy, a date that we are certain that the whole nation, including Donald Trump, will be watching very closely to see what will transpire out of that event. In the meantime, although he had already formed the impression that Kislyak was not necessarily the right point of contact, Kushner went forward with the meeting that Kislyak had requested on November 16. It took place at Trump Tower on November 30th, 2016. At Kushner's invitation, Flynn also attended. Bannon was invited but did not attend. During the meeting, which lasted approximately 30 minutes, Kushner expressed a desire on the part of the incoming administration to start afresh with U.S.-Russian relations. Kushner also asked Kislyak to identify the best person, whether Kislyak or someone else, with whom to direct future discussion, someone who had contact with Putin and the ability to speak with him. The three men also discussed U.S. policy towards Syria, and Kislyak floated the idea of having Russian generals brief the transition team on the topic using a secure communication line. After Flynn explained that there was no secure line in the transition team offices, Kushner asked Kislyak if they could communicate using secure facility at the Russian embassy. Kislyak rejected that idea. Jared Kushner meeting with Sergei Gorkov. On December 6, 2016, the Russian embassy reached out to Kushner's assistant to set up a second meeting between Kislyak and Kushner. Kushner declined several proposed meeting dates, but Kushner's assistant indicated that Kislyak was very insistent about securing a second meeting. Kushner told the office that he did not want to take another meeting because he had already decided Kislyak was not the right channel for him to communicate with Russia. So he arranged to have one of his assistants, Avi Berkowitz, meet with Kislyak in his state. Although embassy official Sergei Kuznetsov wrote to Berkowitz that Kislyak thought it, quote, important, end of quote, to, quote, continue the conversation with Mr. Kushner in person, end of quote, Kislyak nonetheless agreed that to meet and stayed with Berkowitz once it became apparent that Kushner was unlikely to take a meeting. Berkowitz met with Kislyak on December 12, 2016 at Trump Tower. The meeting lasted only a few minutes, during which Kislyak indicated that he wanted Kushner to meet someone who had a direct line to Putin. Sergei Gorkov, the head of the Russian government-owned bank Vanishkonombank, VEB. I will be speaking Russian in no time. Please be patient. Kushner agreed to meet with Gorkov. The one-on-one meeting took place the next day, December 13, 2016, at the Colony Capital Bank in Manhattan, where Kushner had previously scheduled a meeting. VEB, for Vanishkonombank. See, I told you, I will be speaking Russian in no time. VEB was and is the subject of Department of Treasury economic sanction imposed in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea. Kushner did not, however, recall any discussion during his meeting with Gorkov about the sanction against VEB or sanction more generally. Kushner stated in an interview that he did not engage in any preparation for the meeting and that no one on the transition team even did a Google search for Gorkov's name. At the start of the meeting, Gorkov presented Kushner with two gifts, a painting and a bag of soil from the town in Belarus where Kushner family originated. The accounts from Kushner and Gorkov differ as to whether the meeting was diplomatic or business in nature. Kushner told the office that the meeting was diplomatic, with Gorkov expressing disappointment with U.S.-Russia relations under President Obama and hopes for improved relations with the incoming administration. According to Kushner, although Gorkov told Kushner a little bit about his bank and made some statement about the Russian economy, the two did not discuss Kushner's companies or private business dealing of any kind. At the time of the meeting, Kushner companies had a debt obligation coming due on the building it owned at 666 Fifth Avenue, and there had been public reporting both about effort to secure lending on the property and possible conflict of interest for Kushner arising out of his company borrowing from foreign lenders. In contrast, in a 2017 public statement, Webb suggested Gorkov met with Kushner in Kushner's capacity as CEO of Kushner Companies for the purpose of discussing business rather than as part of a diplomatic effort. In particular, Webb characterized Gorkov's meeting with Kushner as part of a series of, quote, roadshow meeting, end of quote, with, quote, representative of major U.S. banks and business circle, end of quote, which included, quote, negotiation, end of quote, and discussion of the, quote, most promising business lines and sectors, end of quote. Foreman's, the investment bank executive mentioned in Volume 1, Section 4.A.1 and 4.B.3, told the office that he met with Gorkov and Webb Deputy Chairman Nikolai Sekumsky in Moscow just before Gorkov left for New York to meet Kushner. According to Forsman, Gorkov and Sekumsky told him that they were traveling to New York to discuss post-election issues with U.S. financial institutions, that their trip was sanctioned by Putin, and that they would be reporting back to Putin upon their return. The investigation did not resolve the apparent conflict in the accounts of Kushner and Gorkov or determine whether the meeting was diplomatic in nature, as Kushner stated, focused on business, as Webb's public statement indicated, or whether it involves some combination of those matters or other matters. Regardless, the investigation did not identify evidence that Kushner and Gorkov engaged in any substantive follow-up after the meeting. Rather, a few days after the meeting, Gorkov's assistant texted Kushner's assistant, quote, "Hi, please inform your side that the information about the meeting had a very positive response," end of quote. Over the following weeks, the two assistants exchanged a handful of additional cordial texts. On February 8, 2017, Gorkov's assistant texted Kushner's assistant, Berkowitz, to try to set up another meeting, and followed up by text at least twice in the days that followed. According to Berkowitz, he did not respond to the meeting request in light of the press coverage regarding the Russian investigation, and did not tell Kushner about the meeting request. For information on the articles or the four-part article that I mentioned earlier, I encourage you to visit the peoplebranch.org website. Visit peoplebranch.org, and I encourage you to read all four parts of the article entitled "The Reason Donald Trump Will Not Be Re-elected in 2020. If you are a patriot, you cannot not be outraged, because this is not a matter of being Democrat or being Republican, because the very reason that our democracy survives is because of that very structure of our government. The minute that you don't have any oversight, then at that point, the idea of democracy in the United States of America ceases to exist. So if you are a Republican and you think it's okay, then you too are no patriot. There is no other word of saying it. No matter what you hear people saying, trying to sugarcoat, trying to go around to explain it to you, that's all it means. If you are okay with what is currently going on with Donald Trump, with the Republican Party, you categorically are not a patriot. And no matter what you think of yourself, you are not a patriot. Because a patriot is someone who would give up, who would make sacrifice sometimes of his or her own life, let alone sacrifice a political party in order to preserve the democracy, in order to preserve the Constitution, in order to preserve the rule of law. So if you cannot do that, don't talk to anyone about being patriot, because you are no patriot. Peter Avens' outreach efforts to the transition team. In December of 2016, weeks after the one-on-one meeting with Putin describing in Volume 1, Section 4.B.1.B supra, Peter Avens attended what is described as a separate, quote, all hands, end of quote, oligarch meeting between Putin and Russia's most prominent businessmen. As in Avens' one-on-one meeting, a main topic of discussion at the oligarch meeting in December of 2016 was the prospect of forthcoming U.S. economic sanction. After the December 2016 all-hands meeting, Avens tried to establish a connection to the Trump team. Avens instructed Richard Byrd to make contact with the incoming Trump administration. Byrd was on the board of directors for Letter One, L1, another company headed by Avens, and had done work for Alpha Bank. Byrd had previously served as U.S. ambassador to Germany and Assistant Secretary of State for European and Canadian Affairs, and one of his primary roles with Alpha Bank and L1 was to facilitate introduction to business contacts in the United States and other Western countries. While at a L1 board meeting held in Luxembourg in late December 2016, Avens pulled Byrd aside and told him that he had spoken to someone high in the Russian government who expressed interest in establishing a communication channel between the Kremlin and the Trump transition team. Avens asked for Byrd's help in contacting members of the transition team. Although Byrd had been responsible for helping Avens build connection in the past, Byrd viewed Avens' request as unusual and outside the normal realm of his dealings with Avens. Byrd, who is a member of the board of CNI, discussed at Volume 1, Section 4.A.4 supra, decided to approach CNI President Dmitry Simes for help facilitating Avens' request, recalling that Simes had some relationship with Kushner. At the time, Simes was lobbying the Trump transition team on Byrd's behalf to appoint Byrd U.S. ambassador to Russia. Byrd contacted Simes by telephone and asked if he could arrange a meeting with Kushner to discuss setting up a high-level communication channel between Putin and the incoming administration. Simes told the office that he declined and stated to Byrd that setting up such a channel was not a good idea in light of the media attention surrounding Russian influence in the US presidential election. According to Simers, he understood that Burt was seeking a secret channel, and Simers did not want CNI to be seen as an intermediary between the Russian government and the incoming administration. Based on what Simers had read in the media, he stated that he already had concern that Trump's business connection could be exploited by Russia, and Simers said that he did not want CNI to have any involvement or apparent involvement in facilitating any connection. In an email dated December 22, 2016, Burt recounted for Avin his conversation with Simers. Quote, through a trusted third party, I have reached out to the very influential person I mentioned in Luxembourg concerning Project A. There is an interest and understanding for the need to establish such a channel, but the individual emphasized that at this moment, with so much intense interest in the Congress and the media over the question of cyber hacking and who ordered what, Project A was too explosive to discuss. The individual agreed to discuss it again after the new year. I trust the individual instinct on this. If this is unclear or you would like to discuss, don't hesitate to call. That's the end of the email. According to Burt, the quote, very influential person, end of quote, reference in his email was Simers, and the reference to a quote, trusted third party, end of quote, was a fabrication, as no such third party existed. Project A, in quote, was a term that Burt created for Avin's effort to help establish a communication channel between Russia and the Trump team, which he used in light of the sensitivities surrounding what Avin was requesting, especially in light of the recent attention to Russia's influence in the US presidential election. According to Burt, his report that there was, quote, interest, end of quote, in a communication channel reflected Simers' views, not necessarily those of the transition team. And in any event, Burt acknowledged that he added some, quote, hype, end of quote, to that sentence to make it sound like there was more interest from the transition team than may have actually existed. Avin replied to Burt's email on the same day saying, quote, thank you, all clear, end of quote. According to Avin, the statement indicated that he did not want the outreach to continue. Burt spoke to Avin sometime thereafter about his attempt to make contact with the Trump team, explaining to Avin that the current administration, the current environment made it impossible. Remaining part of the sentence has been redacted grand jury. Burt did not recall discussing Avin's request with Simers again, nor did he recall speaking to anyone else about the request. In the first quarter of 2017, Avin met again with Putin and other Russian officials. At that meeting, Putin asked about Avin's attempt to build relationship with the Trump administration, and Avin recounted his lack of success. The next sentence has been redacted grand jury. Putin continued to inquire about Avin's effort to connect to the Trump administration in several subsequent quarterly meetings. Avin also told Putin's chief of staff that he had been subpoenaed by the FBI. As part of that conversation, he reported that he had been asked by the FBI about whether he had worked to create a back channel between the Russian government and the Trump administration. According to Alvin, the officials showed no emotion in response to this report and did not appear to care. I hope this was of some use to you, or you got something out of it. Well, if not, you already know what to do. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion. Tell us how we can improve on this. As I mentioned before, this project is here to stay, so you might as well help to make it better. Should you have a particular topic you would like us to discuss here, let us know. We will research it, we will debate it, we will talk about it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Hope you can join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good day. That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful afternoon. See you next time. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
love you all over. And you're just the kind of girl who makes love undercover. I'm just the kind of guy who will love you all over. And you're just the kind of girl who could watch me keel over. Tide is high, but I wanna be